the front has just been turned upside down. The Ukrainian armed forces broke through the defenses all the way to Moscow. A rain of drones poured down directly on the Russians. The occupiers have deflated, but they still hold Pokrovsk in a bloody grip. A fury bursts onto the front line, burning everything to the ground. All this and more in our episode Hellpoint. The Russians have scraped together every last weapon from their reserves. Only donkeys are left. Putin's defense industry is finished. That was a fatal move. The Russian economy is stuck in the shallows. The Russians are scrambling for food. Savages are seeing fish for the first time. But what is really behind the Kremlin's claims of being ready for an endless war? We'll go into more detail on this in the following report.
Assaults on electric scooters, mountain bikes, passenger cars and tractors, transporting ammunition and food with donkeys and horses, using manhole covers as armor on tanks, armored personnel carriers and pickups. All of this calls into question the current capabilities of the world's second largest army. The occupiers' biggest problem is precisely transportation. Just look, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, since the beginning of the war, Russia has lost 10,839 tanks. That is, on average, from 3 to 10 tanks per day. And this is significantly more than the aggressor can produce to replace them. Currently, Russia produces only 6 to 7 new tanks per month. This refers to the newest model, the T-90M, which is assembled at Uralvagonzavod. And this is the peak of their production. They simply cannot produce more physically.
They can't increase production further because they don't have enough machines to manufacture these rather technologically advanced types of weapons. And the Chinese, of course, are supplying them with replacements for the German or various Western European machines. And they need electronics which have been somewhat cut off by sanctions. A lot of technological developments are required, which, in principle, they are incapable of producing.
Old models like the T-72 and T-80 are still coming in handy. They are being restored or modernized. Even T-54 and T-62 tanks have been spotted at the front. These are vehicles from the last century. Since the beginning of the war, the aggressor has reactivated more than 4,000 tanks. That's almost half of what was in storage. And these vehicles required the least amount of repairs. But throughout the entire past year, only 342 tanks were taken out of storage. There is only one reason for this. They are much harder to bring to combat readiness.
Undoubtedly, Soviet weapon stockpiles are running out. That is, things like tanks, armored vehicles, artillery and self-propelled artillery are in great shortage for the Russians. All those storage bases they had since Soviet times now likely have 80% less of these types of weapons left. And the Russians are not producing enough of them.
The situation with artillery shells is this.
According to the Royal United Services Institute, Russia produces about 250,000 shells per month, but expends around 300,000. The monthly deficit is 50,000, which is why they have to purchase North Korean shells, half of which are defective.
Their manpower is also running out. This is once again evidenced by the involvement of North Korean forces. To put it in perspective, 12,000 North Koreans would be enough for Russia for just 10 days of war. There aren't enough soldiers at the front, nor enough workers at the defense factories. Unemployment in Russia is historically low, just 2.3%. But this isn't a sign of strength, it's a sign of exhaustion.
You could say that right now they are starting to release workers, employees from many enterprises in the civilian sector. So it's possible that some of them might end up moving into the military sector. But you understand, whether you work as a baker or at a tank factory, it's all the same to you. You can't just switch from one type of production to another in a single day.
The money for the war is also running out. At the beginning of the invasion, the National Welfare Fund, that is the Rainy Day Fund, reached a historic high of $210 billion. But the liquid part of the fund, meaning the cash reserves, has dropped to $39 billion. If you take into account that Russia spends about $12 billion a month just on the war, this money will last at most until autumn. According to the Ukrainian Foreign Intelligence Service, real inflation in Russia is not 10%, as the authorities claim, but around 30%. And this is confirmed by numerous factors. Food prices have increased by at least a third.
Seriously, there's an alarm behind this glass so people don't argue, God forbid. The price is 8,700 per kilogram of fish. Seriously. It says, by the way, that this is made in Russia. 8,700. Honestly, after seeing prices like that for fish, looking at caviar isn't so scary anymore.
People have stopped getting loans. Banks are afraid they won't see their money again. The entire 2025 state budget was spent in the first 3 months. And now they're looking for more areas to cut. And no, these aren't military expenses, but rather healthcare and housing and utilities.
Basically, if they've already spent all the money they had and are running a deficit as early as May, and if the price of oil stays at this level or even drops, if it drops even further, that will, of course, put even more pressure on the Russian government.
If the Kremlin decides to keep printing money, that will only fuel inflation further. Even in Russia, resources are not unlimited. That's why they will throw all their efforts into a summer offensive to seize as much Ukrainian territory as possible. And here it's worth mentioning the depletion of American weapons supplies in the Ukrainian armed forces, as well as some of the occupiers' strengths.
The types of weapons they rely on much more heavily are, first and foremost, FPV drones, then long-range drones like the Shaheds, ballistic and cruise missiles, and of course, human resources.
Currently, Russia has a noticeable, though not absolute, advantage in drones. Each month, it produces about 120,000 UAVs. The missile threat to Ukraine also remains significant because in recent years the aggressor has increased production of both ballistic Iskanders, cruise missiles like the KH-101, and long-range Kalibr and Kinzhal missiles.
As for ballistic and cruise missiles, there are certainly some limitations, and the Russians produce these missiles in a relatively limited quantity. But this quantity is still significantly higher than, for example, what the United States produces each month, and it definitely exceeds what Europe produces monthly.
However, the economic difficulties in Russia open a window of opportunity because if Ukraine has enough weapons and continues to inflict the same losses, then by the end of the year or at the latest next year, the aggressor's problems will become critical. And another nail in the coffin will be the increase in oil production by OPEC plus countries. This will devalue the raw material even further and thus leave Russia without windfall profits. One of the most significant factors for the future of the Russian economy remains the position of the United States, because the Trump administration's policy could become a lifeline for Russia. But it could just as easily become a death sentence, especially considering what people are already calling sanctions from hell. These are the restrictions prepared in the Senate, which could be implemented even bypassing a presidential veto. Svetlana Chernetska, Yuri Romanyuk, Podrobnosti, British Bureau of Inter-TV channel Marathon, United News.
A fiery collapse over Putin's head. Drones continue to tear Russia apart. Russians curse on camera and run away. Heroes on lianas and buses now instead of the almighty air defense. The dictator's factory was blown to pieces. The armed forces of Ukraine hit a juicy target. Epic footage of whining straight from Moscow has hit the internet. You can't miss this.
It's flying.
There it is, look here. Just not towards us, please.
Quiet, 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 quiet.
In more than 3 years of full-scale war, Russians have learned to recognize the sounds of Ukrainian drones. Local residents are fearfully commenting as UAVs circle over the town of Bolkov. This is the Oriel region. But the drones weren't heading toward the people filming the video, but right here, to the Bolkov semiconductor plant. And they made it, as local residents say, whether with horror or with barely concealed satisfaction.
It's really simple.
Later, the fact of the strike was confirmed 3 times by the Center for Countering Disinformation. At the same time, they added, until recently, the plant was importing Western technologies despite the sanctions. The microchips produced by the enterprise were used in tanks, self-propelled howitzers, Iskander and KH-101 missiles, and various electronic warfare systems. Now, the area around is littered with all kinds of debris. The people of Bolkov are deeply shocked.
Well,
wow!
the residents of Balashika near Moscow are no less shocked, especially by the inaction of their own officials and military.
So where is our security? And those who did find proper security for it are simply filming in silence. Another type of mobile air defense. At least one drone near Moscow was reportedly shot down, according to users, by an ordinary city bus. And this is how protective charms fall from the sky just a few dozen kilometers from the city center. Local residents are filming a souvenir, a piece of the self-propelled anti-aircraft system, Pantsir S-1. While the residential districts of Moscow and the Moscow region were being guarded by heroes on vines and buses, the 2 largest Russian cities announced the carpet plan and closed all airports. Soon Yaroslavl, Vladimir, Ivanovo and Kaluga joined them. And with good reason. Ukrainian drones were seen and heard in the skies over the Lipetsk and Vladimir regions, which is more than 500 kilometers from Ukraine. Anna Basova, details, Inter-TV channel, Marathon, United News.
They are the enemy's nighttime nightmare. These special forces overcome the darkness and instantly appear right behind the Russians. They camouflage themselves masterfully and strike with precision. They leave behind nothing but ashes. How do those operate, whom the occupiers are even afraid to mention out loud? All the details coming up in just a moment.
It's the dead of night in the steppes of southern Ukraine. Fighters from the 3rd Separate Special Forces Unit Omega are making a 10-kilometer forced march. Each of them is carrying more than 10 extra kilograms gear, weapons, and ammunition. This is how endurance is forged.
There is a clearly defined threshold of physical exertion that an average person can handle. Our fighters are just a bit above that. And starting from the upper limit for a Special Forces soldier, we increase the load even further to see what a person is capable of under excessive strain.
Field exercises are conducted specifically at night. This way, the fighters learn to navigate in conditions of limited visibility, since during the day, Special Forces groups are almost never involved in missions.
The deployment of special combat groups, small tactical teams, and reconnaissance units, all of it takes place at night. Unmanned aerial vehicles have changed the concept of warfare. If in 2022 you could enter and storm a tree line without worrying, now you can't take a single step.
Everything is done without unnecessary movement or noise. They move in various combat formations. For example, through a forest belt, they move in a single file column, maintaining visual contact between the fighters.
If we are moving, for example, along a road, then we use a completely different combat formation. In this particular case, we move together in pairs, following a diagonal pattern so that we don't present a single, easily identifiable silhouette to an observer, and to further reduce the likelihood of being hit by weapons that have a high rate of fire.
The commander transmits the direction over the radio, but this time he makes the task more difficult. Instead of geographic coordinates, he gives linear ones. And to determine the route, the Special Forces have to calculate them using a special formula.
Maybe this won't even happen in real combat conditions, but it toughens the soldiers so that their ingenuity and their minds are always working and ready for any situations that, well, in the real conditions of today's war, they will encounter along their way.
Even more obstacles at another location are created by a UAV pilot. A drone with a thermal imaging camera rises into the sky, pursuing the group. The soldiers' task is not to panic, but to camouflage themselves as quickly as possible.
They need to understand that an enemy drone could be hunting them. But that's exactly how it is. Enemy damage. Drones are in the air 24/7, and in the future it could save someone's life. And when they really do find themselves in such stressful situations, they act the way they've been taught.
But the drone makes a simulated drop, and one of the soldiers is wounded. Aid must be given blindly, without using flashlights. And if communication suddenly goes down, the Special Forces have to navigate by the stars.
For example, in practice, how you can use the stars to find north and, for instance, navigate from one point to another by azimuth. Because, well, missions can be different, and all the devices might fail or run out of power, and a soldier could end up alone. How can he, for example, make his way back to our positions?
The group includes both experienced soldiers and new recruits. For example, the soldier with the call sign Yona joined the unit just 3 weeks ago. He used to be an IT specialist, now he's a Special Forces operator. He says his expectations were fully met.
I knew the physical training would be tough, so I prepared for it and got through it. And right now, it's interesting to learn from the experience of people who have been in the unit for a long time. It's good that these skills can later be used in real combat.
And this kind of training goes on every day and every night. In the National Guard's Omega units, they assure that they are ready for any combat mission, and their level of motivation is the best proof of that. Andriy Anastasov, Ihor Miknoshin, details, Inter-TV channel, Marathon, United...
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
United News.
It takes off to pinpoint the enemy with meter-level accuracy. And as soon as the coordinates are in hand, the Ukrainian Armed Forces artillery delivers its devastating strike. Furia is a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone that changes the course of battle from above. While the occupiers are futilely hunting for the Phantom, our soldiers are already preparing the next target. What are the characteristics of this unique bird, and why will the Russians never be able to surpass it? We'll tell you more about this in the report right now. Final preparations.
I'm packing the parachute to land the plane when it returns.
We attach the rubber band to the plane, stretch it across the field by hand, and then release it.
And the Fury takes off into the sky.
Mikhailo, there's really nothing too difficult about this. You just need a bit of strength in your hands, and you have to know which way the wind is blowing.
Volodymyr, it's a very effective bird, made specifically for the military. It's easy to use, which makes it very suitable for carrying out combat missions.
Narrator, the Fury crew has 4 soldiers, a driver and 3 drone operators. The guys have been working since early morning.
Volodymyr, today 2 guns were also damaged. D-30 and D-20 guns. They operate, and it turns out they fire at both civilians and the military.
Mikhailo, the orcs were just pulling out and replacing the guns, and at that moment we caught them and started working on them. And then neighboring units joined in and everything started flying there. Shells and FPVs.
Narrator, and during the TSN visit, guided by the pilots, the artillery of the 44th Brigade destroyed several more Russian guns. Narrator, the crew works underground so that enemy drones can't spot them. In just a few square meters, they have their workspace, a small kitchen, a wash basin, and beds.
Volodymyr, we have a driver over there, Volodymyr. Basically, 90% of all this everyday comfort is thanks to him. He made the little kitchen, the shelves, all these things to make life easier, and even those paintings are his work too.
Narrator, the guys have worked together for half a year, says the soldier with the call sign Almaz. The 24-year-old has been in the military for 6 years. Before the full-scale invasion, he played drums in a military orchestra.
Almaz. By education, I'm a musician, a drummer, and I served as a musician for 2 years. Then I transferred to a combat unit. My father was also mobilized, and my brother is fighting as well.
Narrator, the soldiers say the work is interesting, especially when they see Russian equipment burning.
Kostyantin, when we destroyed a Ural truck loaded with ammunition and a cannon, it was a real fireworks show. Absolutely amazing. It was so bright, it even blinded the camera.
Narrator, the soldiers say that their Furia drone alone has completed more than 200 successful flights. A lot depends on the weather conditions. And that's where the Maestro comes in handy. He used to serve in a meteorological battery.
Kostyantin, right now in the summer, cold and hot air currents also have a big impact. If there are hot currents, the drone might be forced down or lifted up, so there's nothing we can do about that. The drone itself will either rise or drop down to the ground.
Narrator, with the help of the Furia, the pilots track every move the occupiers make. They say that even though they're tired, they have to stay here until the end. Above all, for the sake of their families who are waiting for them at home. Narrator, Kira Oves, Andriy Kopovka, Zaporizhia, TSN 1+1 Marathon United News.
A live broadcast from the very heart of Pokrovsk. The hum of FPV drones never ceases over the city. The occupiers are ruthlessly destroying everything around. This is yet another bloody order from the Kremlin generals. The city is ablaze, the ground is shaking, everything around is on fire. Pokrovsk is holding on. More details about the situation in the area where the enemy has come dangerously close are in the following report.
All access roads to Pokrovsk have long been under enemy fire control. On the most dangerous sections of the route, the crew commander pushes the armored van to its maximum speed. But even here, there are traffic jams caused by destroyed vehicles.
You can't get around it. I was bringing some necessary things for the dugout, and then we got hit.
And even in Pokrovsk itself, safety is out of the question. The Russians are trying to enter the residential areas, so they attack the city around the clock with artillery and aviation. It's already hard to find even a single building left intact here.
So this is the center of Pokrovsk. Well, a Russian Kaby hit the residential neighborhood, and here are the consequences. 5 houses destroyed, a fire, and it's unclear whether there were civilians here or if they had already left, fortunately. Now the police are trying to search this place to see if there are any victims or not.
There are only a few minutes to search. Because of the abundance of Russian drones, staying in one place for too long, especially with a large vehicle, is extremely dangerous.
on and take care, guys.
Go ahead, thank you.
There's another one right above the street, on the next one over.
Did it fly by here?
Kostya, are there a lot of them here?
A lot, especially lately. There are probably as many as flies here.
That's exactly why all the crews of the White Angel evacuation groups are armed with shotguns. Right now, this is the most effective means against Russian drones, and not just the ones flying overhead. This Russian FPV drone fell right onto the path that residents of this neighborhood walk every day. People asked the police to clear or at least deactivate the drone. After several shots from a rifle, the drone no longer poses a threat. The roar of explosions and gunfire in Pokrovsk doesn't stop for a single minute these days. The Russians are methodically turning this city of 70,000 into complete ruins and a zone of humanitarian catastrophe.
Oh no, this is absolute hell. And the most horrifying thing here, the thing that truly chills you to the bone, is that under these ruins, beneath the collapsed buildings and shattered remains, under these ruins, there could still be people trapped, people who are desperately waiting for help. And it's just impossible to get them out. It's impossible because heavy machinery simply can't get in here due to the unstable and dangerous conditions. And there's absolutely no way to clear all the massive debris by hand alone. The situation is heartbreaking and utterly hopeless for those who might still be alive beneath the rubble. Plus, it's dangerous.
And in this hell, according to official data, there are still more than 2,000 civilians remaining. But with each passing day, their number decreases. People are simply dying from shelling and attacks by Russian drones. Many are buried by their neighbors right in the yards and parks in hastily dug graves. But even after all this, only a few agree to leave.
Your son reached out to us so that we could rescue you from this hell.
Thank you very much, but we won't go. Tell them that on the phone. God has already decided how long we are to live here.
For many residents of Pokrovsk, the unknown is scarier than Russian shells. And there aren't actually that many so-called waiters here either.
Glory to the heroes. Putin is a
Mr. Mikola and his wife don't seem to be against leaving, but he doesn't know how they'll make a living in the rear. He says that before the start of the full-scale invasion, he didn't even have time to apply for his pension, so he's afraid to evacuate.
Right now I have no pension. Where the hell am I supposed to go? You say, leave there. I'll leave, sure. But what am I supposed to do there?
They'll help you.
Yes, they'll help. There are lawyers. How was last night?
They were shelling all day. Well, we have this suspicion that by May 9th, they want basically to get in here as much as possible.
Narrator, and the Russians are advancing. If street fighting starts in Pokrovsk, civilians won't survive here. The crew of White Angels saw something similar in Avdiivka, Okeretin, and Saladiv. Yet despite the tense situation, some residents are even returning to the burning city. According to the police, this man's wife and 2 underage daughters recently returned to Pokrovsk from evacuation. Despite the crew's persuasion, the father never admitted where he was hiding his family. And such cases are not isolated.
Man, my guess is that they're here. We've had cases where people were evacuated in January, but literally in March, they returned and had to be evacuated again. Men with children. Families with children, yes, unfortunately, they do come back.
Narrator, in order to get at least someone out of this hell, the White Angels crews risk their lives several times a day. Some people have to be persuaded, while others are already begging to be taken out from under the shelling. This elderly couple admits they stayed until the very end, right up until a Russian shell hit their house.
Woman, thank you.
Man, oh, thank you, yes, thank you.
Woman, you gave a place to go.
It's like this.
We come.
Man, when it hits, that's when people...
Woman, yes.
Narrator, Hennady understands these people perfectly, because he himself is a displaced person, originally from Avdiivka. From the now occupied city, he once used to evacuate people to Pokrovsk, and now he tries to evacuate them from here.
Man, The scariest thing is when you were at that person's place a week ago or a day ago, trying to persuade them to leave, and then you come back, the house is already destroyed, and the neighbors tell you that person has died. That's the incredibly scariest thing. Then in the evening, you just sit and think and reflect about everything you did wrong, that you couldn't convince that person, and now they're left there under the rubble.
Narrator. As long as there are people remaining in the frontline towns and villages, the White Angels will do everything they can every day to save their lives. Stanislav Kukarchuk, Vyacheslav Romandan, Oleg Kukarski. Details from Inter TV channel, Marathon United News.
Darina, that's all from me for now. I was with you, Darina Gutskalo. Even more harrowing news from the front in our next broadcast. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.